Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first Anti-Racism Town Hall, the first in a quarterly series. It's my pleasure to introduce to you UCSF Chancellor Sam Hoggett.
Thank you, Lisa, and let me also welcome you all to this very first of our quarterly anti-racism town halls. I'm going to keep my remarks brief this afternoon because we have quite a few speakers and we want to leave sufficient time for questions. As we put these town halls together, it's very important that we offer space and time for individual voices as well as reports from leadership. As you know, the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and other acts of violence against the Black community have led to grief, anger, and outrage around the world. There has been a widespread call to dismantle the underlying systems that perpetuate anti-Blackness, Blackness, and racism. These events have led UCSF leadership to also re-examine the structures within our own organization that preserve and reproduce racism. Racism in all forms is contrary to the core values of professionalism, respect, integrity, diversity, and excellence that drives UCSF's mission of health research, education, care delivery, and public service. Moreover, anti-Blackness and all forms of racism are a severe public health crisis that we as an institution dedicated to the health sciences must address with rigor and determination. We have seen our organization react swiftly to another public health crisis, the novel coronavirus. So we know that we can do things differently, quickly to achieve results. To that end, we have committed to expanding and accelerating our efforts to dismantle structural racism on our campus and at UCSF Health. A few weeks ago, we formalized the UCSF Anti-Racism Initiative that is being led by Vice Chancellor Renee Navarro. I want to point out that Vice Chancellor Navarro and Provost Lowenstein are not working alone on this initiative. They have the full support of the Chancellor's cabinet, including each of the deans from our professional schools and the graduate division. We on the leadership team are working steadily and in concert to create a more equitable and safer UCSF, one that offers everyone the opportunity to thrive and to do our best work with and for each other. In today's town hall, the first of a quarterly series of town halls, we will focus on anti-racism efforts for our students, postdocs, residents, and fellows. We will hear from Vice Chancellor Navarro about the key concerns and common themes that we have heard from our learners. We will also hear from the deans of the schools of dentistry, medicine, nursing, pharmacy, and the graduate division about changes to their curricula, as well as efforts to improve the experience of learning and discovering at UCSF. Finally, before Vice Chancellor Navarro speaks, I'd like to encourage all members of the university community to stay engaged throughout this important moment in time. The Anti-Racism Initiative is an ongoing, continuous endeavor, and we will need all of you to make it a success. I truly believe that together, if we commit ourselves to the full lived expression of our Pride values, we can make substantial change and create a just, equitable, and welcoming UCSF for everyone. So I thank you for joining us, and now let's hear from Vice Chancellor Navarro. Renee.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon and welcome to the first in our ongoing series of anti-racism town halls. Our goal today is to provide an opportunity to discuss with you our current and our evolving plans for dismantling systemic racism across the UCSF enterprise. While we have focused today's discussion on barriers that our learners face during our discussion today, there will be opportunities to discuss overarching issues, including the diversification of our academic and our staff workforce, enhancing the climate of inclusion, and eliminating interpersonal biases. I want to share that, in fact, we are so moved by the fact that you stood up and you spoke up and asked for change during this moment. It has been your drive and your leadership in these areas that really is pushing us to be our better selves. And we thank you for that. Through our strategic roadmap to inclusive excellence, we have been driving strategic changes and systemic changes within UCSF over the course of the last 9 years. However, this moment calls for us to do transformational change rather than incremental changes. And we must all be activated and work collectively to become anti-racist. I want to say that we hear you, we see you, and we hear you. And we have been listening to your calls of action. We have heard from over 19 groups from the Black Caucus, student groups in each of our professional schools and the graduate division, faculty, staff, new affinity groups, including anti-racist at UCSF and humans at UCSF. And over the course of these calls to action, we've identified some specific things that we will be working on. Police violence, training, making some mandatory diversity training for all members of our campus and health system communities. Healing and wellness, how do we provide for the needed healing from the traumatic impact of racial trauma? How are we having culturally focused programs? Across our mission areas, and we will focus today on the anti-racism curriculum and the need for the faculty development that will go along with that. We've heard about the need for our staff and our faculty to be diversified, that we have opportunities for development and promotion and advancement, and what is our accountability and our actions and resources around issues of Mount Sutro land and Indigenous people, the funding for equity work that's being done disproportionately by minority communities, and how are we going to address the issues within our prison system, and how will we be keeping ourselves accountable in communicating with transparency to all of you. The actions we have taken have included our messages, and we know that while our commitments and our words are important, they're insufficient without actions. And these town halls will describe our actions and give us an opportunity to really engage you in conversations about what we're doing, how we can do it better, how we can advance this work. Our safety task force and security and policing at UCSF has been launched, led by Provost Dan Lowenstein and myself. We're well on the way of working through issues related to that. DEI mandatory training and education is being developed and should launch in the fall. Anti-racism curriculum we'll hear more about. And then advancing excellence in our staff recruitment efforts, and as well as advancing excellence in our faculty diversification. And along with that is our anchor institution and our commitment to our communities. The DEI mandatory training will be a foundational platform for us to have a common language and understanding. It is not, as you know, going to be sufficient with one training to help us to become the anti-racist we seek to be, but it will provide that foundation and will be followed with how one can develop their own path to really becoming anti-racist. Additionally, the advancing staff and equity recruitment and excellence in staff recruitment will incorporate a number of best practices so that in fact we can fulfill our goal of having a diverse and equitable staff throughout the reins of our staff and into our leadership. The Office of Diversity and Outreach has really worked immediately to respond to the needs of our community as it relates to Black Lives Matter. Communication, we feel, is a critical element of that. We created this Matter is the Minimum newsletter, which is a weekly newsletter to share with you what's happening on campus, how we're responding, and how we can be more responsive to your needs. We've identified and collated resources that are available on the website as it relates to self-education in these areas, and also for, very importantly, the healing. how do we heal from the racial trauma that many of us have experienced, and what are the resources there? A webinar series with Dante King, specifically addressing anti-Blackness and its link to racism, privilege, and power, has in 2 of the 4 in the series have been completed, with over 1,600 members of our campus community participating in those, and they will be available by recording as well. So with that, that is where we are at this point, and we recognize that there is a ongoing equity improvement need on our campus. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our deans for them to share with you their specific actions as they have been working very diligently with the Chancellor's Cabinet, with the leadership within each of the schools and the graduate division to advance these issues. We'll start with the School of Nursing and Dean Gillis. Catherine.
Thanks very much, Renee, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm pleased to represent the School of Nursing and share some of what's been going on most recently. I would say that we consider the opportunity before us to be an important and significant opportunity. The issues of anti-racism were issues that were at the forefront of our work in the School of Nursing, even before it became obvious that a deeper commitment and a more accelerated commitment was necessary. I'd like to acknowledge that what we're doing in the school, we think is appropriate to the school, and we are working very closely with the leadership on the campus in campus appropriate initiatives. They are not mutually exclusive, but the ones that I'm going to address today are the ones that are more specific to the School of Nursing. We think of the work that we're doing as, first of all, related to the learning environment. And long before the summer months, we were working together with our students to create the school's statement on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a policy on the learning environment to guide curriculum and learning in all of our programs. And I'm very pleased to say that although it took us 2 years to achieve agreement on what that document should say, that document was worked on, discussed, brought to our faculty council, and unanimously endorsed at the last meeting of the last academic year. So we do have a statement of our beliefs, and that really is serving to ground us as we move forward with with some of our more specific initiatives. We believe that the learning environment not only includes a statement and agreement about our beliefs, but some basic preparation for enacting our beliefs. And so during the summer months, we have contracted with the Pacific Educational Group. They have begun a series of small, they are engaging us in conversation about anti-racism. Courageous Conversations is their platform. They have met with a number of small groups of our faculty and staff. And over the last week, they met with 2 very large town hall size groups to begin to initiate some conversations about race and the role race plays in the work that we do and the lives that we lead. Their work will be reported out to us in a couple of weeks, and we're taking their reports into our strategic planning process, which is continuing with a meeting in September and then another meeting before the end of the year. We struggle with how quickly we need to act, and yet we want to act thoughtfully. And I assure you that we will act. More specifically, we have been acting in the space of curriculum, and under the guidance of our Associate Dean, Maureen Shannon, and with the able assistance of our Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion and Outreach, Dr. Judy Martin Holland, we have been working on the development of some curricular changes. Our faculty are very committed to these changes. They have been they have developed a structural inequalities task force, which includes faculty and students, They're evaluating the curriculum as it's focused on structural racism, inequities, and developing new outcomes for our students. In addition, the faculty are looking at the development of threaded content in some of our programs, with some very specific core courses, particularly in the master's program, which is our largest program. Clearly, to implement our aspirations, our commitments successfully, we need the faculty and students and staff who can help us to do that work. We are in the process of meeting with faculty to talk about what kinds of supports they believe they need to continue to be successful, but we have a long-standing commitment to equity, both in our clinical work and in our scientific work, and we expect that to continue. Our students are admitted to our programs through a process of holistic admission, something we've written about in our newsletters, something we will continue to emphasize. I'm proud to say that our student body is very diverse. I think this year our MEPN class was about 45% diverse, but that's only getting people in the door. The important thing is that we commit to making sure that once we have people in the door, we have an environment that sustains and develops and supports those students to do their very best work. And to do that, we need the very best faculty. In the last year, we hired a number of faculty through initiatives that were made available on the campus to bring in faculty who were from more diverse backgrounds than the majority of our faculty, our current faculty. We will continue to work with the campus on that, and we are continuing to work internally to make sure that we do our very best to create pools of faculty applicants who represent our commitment to equity. I hope that you'll have questions for me. And now we're going to move on to the next speaker, and that is Dr. Joe Guglielmo.
He's having technical difficulties, so
So
we'll
move
move on to the next.
Dr. Reddy?
Dr. Reddy, please. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you for having this opportunity. During the last 2 months, I've been meeting with a lot of members of our Black community throughout the school. I was struck by one Friday night conversation with our learners that lasted a couple of hours. Our learners talked about their lives at UCSF and their lives before and outside of UCSF. They said out loud what they had only said to each other or trusted advisors. This was a very brave thing to do. I can only imagine how hard it was, and I am very proud of each of them. They pointed out the relatively few faces that look like theirs at UCSF. They talked about feeling excluded at social events, about casual remarks and behaviors in our clinical education that cause anger and pain, and how the residue of these slights and microaggressions inexorably accumulate throughout their training. They talked about the widespread ignorance that many students of color experience on the path to UCSF, and about personal history that some of us can only scarcely imagine. About how there are few people who get it and even fewer people to talk to. As they shared their experiences, I felt tears well up. I felt the pain and the struggle of our Black learners, faculty, staff, and alumni. I would like to apologize to our Black community, and especially to our learners, for the pain, racism, sense of invisibility you have experienced. I am deeply sorry. And I am fully aware and I understand the requirement for concerted, rigorous, and sustained response. You have my commitment to do the work with you on change. I know together we can do better. Throughout our conversations with our learners, leadership, faculty, and staff, we decided on several actions related to the curriculum and student experience. We're adding required anti-racism reading followed by facilitated discussions for all incoming students. As a long-term goal, we'll expand this to all learners as a mandatory course. For current learners, we are recruiting faculty from outside the school to lead class discussions on anti-racism and healthcare. This revised course will be ready for spring of 2021. We are adding a grand round speaker series this fall on diversity, inclusion, and science. We will also debut a Black Film Forum this fall. Through film and facilitated discussion, our team will be further educated on structural racism, racial bias, white privilege, and other topics. The School of Dentistry will require all faculty, staff, and students to take the implicit association test. Also, the School of Dentistry is very supportive of Vice Chancellor Navarro's initiative and supports mandatory diversity and inclusion training university-wide for all faculty and staff. This is a key component to improving the learning environment for students. In future town halls, I hope to have the opportunity to share additional components of our anti-racism plan, which includes faculty and staff recruitment of Black and underrepresented minorities, and reimagining and expanding student recruitment. Our hope is by instituting these actions, we will improve our school for current and our future alumni, staff, and our faculty, and create a sense of pride for the school and the university. I stand with our learners, and our learners are watching what we do, and they deserve our action. And believe me, I know they will hold me accountable. I commit to do the hard work along with my colleagues on this Zoom and throughout the university to help UCSF lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Reddy. Dean Guglielmo, School of Pharmacy.
Thank you, Chancellor Navarro. I'll start by saying, while the School of Pharmacy has made some progress in this area, I fully acknowledge it has not been enough. We must do better. I give an example of at least some initiatives that preceded the anti-racism curriculum efforts at the present time by telling you that our Curriculum and Educational Policy Committee put forward a mandate that in fact social determinants of health are emphasized with appropriate prioritization in all appropriate classes. We came to the conclusion while our learners, we expect them to be expert in the precise use of drugs, taking into account kinetics, genomics, and beyond. It means nothing if you don't appreciate the social determinants of health, homelessness, food insecurity, and beyond. I'd like to say anti-racism is an activist approach. Not being racist is decisively passive. So I first want to thank the many students who reached out to me with their ideas regarding anti-racism. As I stated to our student colleagues in our meeting, this is the time for activism, and I thank them for being activists. They requested information regarding our admissions process, clinical practice, faculty hiring and training, student admissions, and beyond, but we agreed that in fact the initial emphasis in terms of our collaborative efforts would be an anti-racist PharmD curriculum. To that end, the first agreed upon step has been that a task force has been formed specifically centered upon developing an anti-racist PharmD curriculum. That task force includes students, staff, and faculty. There are 2 charges for the committee. The first charge is to fully assess and describe the current state of affairs as it relates to anti-racism in the entire PharmD curriculum. This would include not only the non-experiential didactics, small groups, skills learning, etc., but this would also include all experience, the rotations, if you be. And in addition to that charge of fully assessing and describing the current state of anti-racism in the PharmD curriculum, the second task is to provide a series of recommendations or goals or targets toward the creation, but also continuous quality improvement associated with an anti-racist PharmD curriculum. We've asked that these two tasks take place within 60 days from the first meeting. Once that report comes to the dean's office will be responsible for delivering a plan to address each and every one of the task force recommendations. Lastly, we consider that this task force recommendation and goals is a living document. This is something that will be capable of including new goals and associated plans. Once again, I repeat, while I'm proud of the School of Pharmacy and some of its initial efforts, we've done far too little, and I'm thankful to all the faculty and students, and now our activist students, for in fact, getting us moving in the direction to fully realizing an anti-racist PharmD curriculum. Thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Navarro, to say a few words about the School of Pharmacy.
Thank you very much, Dean Guglielmo. Now the School of Medicine, Dean King.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yesterday, we shared updates on initiatives the School of Medicine has undertaken to confront bias and discrimination and to reiterate our commitment to the expansive anti-racism work that lies ahead. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the School of Medicine's anti-racism work in the area of medical education. We believe that it is critical that all graduates of the UCSF School of Medicine be well versed in the history of structural racism and recognize the consequences of structural racism on medicine and science, and have explicit skills in both working with patients from groups who have been marginalized by or discriminated against in medicine, and in using their voices for social change. To accomplish these goals, we realize that we need more than an anti-racism curriculum. We need an anti-racist educational program with all elements designed to align toward these goals. This means looking not only at what we teach, but how we teach, who teaches, and how we measure our learners and faculty's development of critical competencies. Fortunately, the School of Medicine educational leadership, along with the expertise from our Differences Matter action groups, have been working since 2015 to transform our educational programs. Substantial progress has been made and more is needed, but I'm confident that we have the right people and the right processes working for even greater impact. The Bridges curriculum specifically includes social justice as a foundational pillar, which led to the development of 2 courses that incorporate content on structural racism and its devastating legacy on the health of our communities. Our current work is to integrate evidence about racism and its impact on health throughout all blocks and clerkships, using new integrative sessions to highlight how racism impacts health at all levels of wellness. We want to connect the dots about how health and healthcare disparities arise and what countermeasures can be implemented to address them. The high-intensity teaching model of funding educational course and clerkship leaders was designed to enable medical education to recruit more diverse faculty into leadership roles in medical education and to establish expectations for core faculty competencies, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all high-intensity teaching faculty. To date, over 97% of all high-intensity teaching faculty and coaches have completed the day-long DEI champion training, and many of these individuals have pursued more advanced training. Our next step is to require that all educational leaders across undergraduate and graduate medical education participate in core diversity, equity, and inclusion training, regardless of where the funding for their positions come from. UCSF led the way in identifying issues of population group differences in clerkship grading and AOA selection that always favored majority populations. We eliminated honors in the core clerkship year to allow our students more time to develop skills prior to high stakes grading that impacts career opportunities. Our work has been published and is influencing many institutions to follow our lead. We lobbied successfully to have the USMLE Step 1 grading changed to pass-fail. And our Academic Senate Committee on Curriculum and Educational Policy approved withdrawing our participation in AOA as it fundamentally misaligned with our purpose and values. We continue to work on supporting the development of systems of learning and assessment that support trusting relationships between faculty and learners. And our next step involves a toolkit for faculty to help ensure equitable assessment of individual students. I'd like to close by saying that one of the things that UCSF does best is to convene smart people from different disciplines to tackle thorny problems, counteracting the impact of structural racism on our communities, and ensuring that we are approaching race in medicine and science in as rigorous a way as possible is one of the most complex problems imaginable. To that end, we are working to develop a series of seminars on these topics, and medical education will participate to apply the results of these discussions into our curriculum as soon as they become available. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean King. And now for the graduate division, Dean Watkins.
Thank you, Renee. Since I have just 5 minutes today to present on the myriad of efforts to dismantle systemic racism and promote anti-racism in the graduate division, I'm going to focus my remarks on our curricular and co-curricular programming for PhD students. The first thing I'd like to discuss is our Initiative for Maximizing Student Development, or IMSD program. This is an NIH-funded training grant that supports Black and other underrepresented students pursuing PhDs in the basic sciences, and it focuses on the first 2 years of training. The hallmark of our program is the summer research rotation. New students come to UCSF early to get settled in the city and to do a lab rotation before starting classes, for which they receive their usual stipend. Each student is matched with a dedicated faculty mentor, and throughout the year, there's co-curricular programming that's led by our Assistant Dean for Diversity and Learner Success, Deanne Duncan, and my faculty co-PI on the grant, Jason Sello. These sessions focus on things like choosing a thesis lab, recognizing and overcoming stereotype threat, recognizing and overcoming imposter syndrome, and promoting well-being. Above all, the program strives to help students to maintain their personal identity while developing the professional identity as scientists to bring their fully authentic selves to the work they do in the lab. We've had this grant for about 20 years, and each year NIH funds 12 students, 6 first years and 6 second years. This year, using graduate division funds, we've expanded that number by 350% to a possible total of 42, so 21 first years and 21 second years. We're pleased to welcome so many more students into the program and to help them build a strong sense of community and a network of support to foster their success both during and after their time at UCSF. Of course, we also want to engage all of our students in combating and dismantling racism in science and academia. I'm excited to present this suite of new courses now being offered in the graduate division. In the fall quarter, starting this year, all first-year basic science PhD students will be taking a 3-credit course called Racism in Science. It'll be taught by Professor Amy Medeiros, a faculty member in the School of Medicine's Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, who's a nationally recognized scholar in critical race studies and the history of science and medicine. This introductory course will provide the historical background of systemic racism in scientific research. It will explore the relationship between notions of race and science and how scientific research has been informed by and perpetuates anti-Black racism. This course will also examine the impact of bias and a lack of diversity in science and ways to actively address these deficiencies. And students will learn the principles of social justice-oriented scientific research and its potential. In the winter quarter, Dean Deanne Duncan, who's also an adjunct faculty member in the School of Nursing's Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences, will teach a course on DEI academic leadership that will bring together training in diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and leadership to prepare graduate students to incorporate DEI values in scientific leadership roles. Through exposure to history, theories, self-reflection, and critical discussion, this course will help to develop and apply foundational principles to become a DEI leader in academic institutions and scientific enterprises. And a key part of the course is its service learning aspect, in which students will take on DEI projects within their graduate programs. In acknowledgement of the time it takes to do DEI work, students will be paid a stipend for this course, and they will be given a budget for carrying out their capstone service learning project. Then, in the spring quarter, we'll capitalize on the expertise of advanced graduate students in our social science programs to offer 3 different courses for the basic science students. The spring quarter curriculum for the basic science PhD programs is designed around mini courses that are formatted as intensive roundtable discussions of current literature on particular topics. And the quarter is divided into 3 modules of 2 to 3 weeks each, with programs offering several mini course choices per module. The 3 new mini courses will be taught by our UC President's Pre-Professoriate Fellows and will offer deeper dives into specific and timely topics on race and racism in science, and specifically anti-Black racism, through the lenses of history, anthropology, and sociology. And the fellows will be paid for this work. I'll stop there, but I hope that at subsequent town halls to be able to share with you other aspects of the work being done in the graduate division. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dean Watkins, and thank you to all of our deans. At this point in the program, I'll ask all of our panelists, Chancellor Hawgood and all of the deans, to turn on your cameras, and we're going to have a facilitated question and answer period, which will be moderated by Senior Director of Strategic Communications, Lisa Cisneros. Lisa?
Thanks, Renee. So thanks for everyone posing questions. We have around 50 questions and we'll try to get through most of them. The first question is for Chancellor Hawgood. Chancellor, can you please comment on addressing calls to remove police from UCSF campus locations?
Thank you, Lisa. I have formed a campus safety task force that Vice Chancellor Navarro mentioned in her opening remarks. It's co-chaired by Vice Chancellor Navarro and Provost Lowenstein, and has a very diverse and competent makeup. The charge of that committee is not to remove police from all campus sites, and that will not be happening. The charge for the committee is to evaluate the best and most inclusive way to secure and ensure campus safety. I'll read very quickly the specific charge to this committee so you have a sense of what they're working on. I've asked them to address the following issues: the responsibility and engagement of the community in maintaining a safe, inclusive environment. That's code for saying this is a responsibility for us all, and we must define all of our responsibilities for this. Best practices for training police and security personnel in diversity, equity, and inclusion, with a specific focus on racial profiling. What is the best responses to mental health and wellness checks other than security? Accountability and transparency in the reporting of security activity to the entire campus, and the assessment of our community-facing safety activity, that is the responsibilities for the communities that surround the campus. So I look forward to the task force's report, which is due to me within 60 days of their work beginning a week or 2 ago.
Thank you, Chancellor. This one is for Vice Chancellor Navarro. Many of us in the junior faculty at UCSF have heard that racist and misogynistic trope over and over. We don't want to lower our standards in hiring and promotions. What strong policies will be implemented in recruitment and promotions to stop this type of discrimination? DEI training is not enough.
Thank you for that question. And I agree with you that the DEI training is not sufficient. It's necessary, but in and of itself, it's not sufficient. You actually have to change your policies and your procedures. And in order to do so, we have changed some structures. So for example, we have faculty equity advisors that really serve to advise on evidence-based best practices for the recruitment of faculty members. Those equity advisors serve each of the committees, which are also constituted with diversity in mind. Evidence shows that if you have a diverse committee, the committee undergoes training on unconscious bias in the selection process for faculty. And in fact, the equity advisors serve to determine whether or not they have searched and adequately identified a diverse pool of candidates that's reflective of the availability pool, and engage and support the search process such that we can increase the diversity of our faculty. Over the course of the last 9 years, we have more than doubled our Black faculty at UCSF. It's not enough, but we've made some changes and we anticipate that we will continue to do so. We've more than doubled the number of Latinx faculty at UCSF as well. Every aspect of the process has to be looked at and potentially disrupted to facilitate a different outcome. And we're working to do that systematically.
Thank you so much. This one's for Dean Watkins. With all the schools individually planning curriculum, how much are they discussing this with one another to share resources and develop some standards of education on anti-racism?
That's a great question. Thank you. The answer is yes, to the extent that we can. The education deans, who are not on this call, but who really lead the education mission at each of the 4 schools and the graduate division, as well as the education dean for physical therapy, meet on a weekly basis. And this is one of the things that they are beginning to talk about, is to share best practices, to share new innovations, what worked, what didn't, and then to think about producing courses, curricula, workshops, experiences that can be attended interprofessionally. I think there's a big ambition among the professional schools to work across the disciplines, and it would make sense to have the anti-racist curriculum incorporate into those efforts. And I may reach out to my other professional school dean colleagues to elaborate on that. Or not.
Does anyone want to comment on that? Any other deans? All right. This is a question directed to Dean King and Dean Gillis. First, Dean King, it's the same question for you both. What is the percentage of ladder rank faculty of color in the schools of nursing and medicine?
So there are about less than 10% of our entire faculty are in the ladder rank series. And I actually, off the top of my head, don't know the exact number that are underrepresented in medicine in the ladder rank series, but I think it has to be less than 10% of the 10% that are underrepresented in medicine. Actually, Renee, maybe your team knows that actual number. It's on the website, but I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's small.
Overall, 4.6% of the ladder rank faculty at UCSF are African American. In the School of Medicine, it's 3.3%. And in the School of Nursing, ladder rank faculty, I have 15.
Have that.
15.
I have it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and the reason I have it is that the schools who are our peer institutions, our top 10 peers, just pooled that information so that we could, and we're in the process of talking about the strategies that have been successful in these schools so that we can share our information too. The School of Nursing has a total of 153 faculty, and so only about 23% of our faculty are in ladder ranks. But overall in the school, 35% of our faculty of the 153 are non-white, and it's just, it's an unacceptable political term, but it conveys what we're trying to say here. And the ladder rank faculty, out of 36 who are ladder rank, we have 17 who are identified as non-white. So 47% of our ladder rank faculty are actually considered to be minority. Higher than I would have expected, but it's a small group.
Okay, thank you so much. This one is for Vice Chancellor Navarro. Thank you for hosting this session. Would these seminars include facilitators or speakers who are people of color? I feel that they have much to share and would like to hear their perspectives, experiences, and content.
We're certainly open to hearing how we can best serve the campus community and facilitate engagement. One of the things that I try to avoid, for me personally and for other Black and minority colleagues, is for us to come and share our pain as a way of helping others sort of understand the kinds of traumas that we've experienced, because it in and of itself is traumatizing. We wanted the deans who are responsible for the curricula within their school and division to be here to present, but certainly we're open to hearing how we might best facilitate engagement around these really critically important issues.
Thank you. This one's for Chancellor Hoggood. Chancellor, can you comment on the future of Toland Hall murals in UC Hall? It's the history of medicine work. The commenter has a long comment, but basically is asking, honoring the history of Black and brown people within the medical community in our country is very important. Could you guarantee that these murals will be honored by UCSF by including them to be available to and viewed by all?
So for those who are on the town hall who may not be familiar with these murals, they are frescoes painted onto directly onto a plaster wall in the Toland Lecture Hall in University Hall. They were painted in the 1930s, and they, as Lisa said, represent a history of medicine in California. University Hall, and therefore Toland Hall, is slated for demolition. The building was built in 1917, is functionally obsolete, and has very, very serious seismic issues. That is why the building is mostly empty. The murals are an important part of UCSF's history, and you've seen press recently that suggests that we are going to just demolish the murals as part of demolishing the building. We have to do an environmental impact report, which is out for public comment at the moment, and by law, the environmental impact report has to acknowledge potential damage to important environmental issues, including historically important art. And by law, we have to report on the worst possible outcome, which would be damage or destruction of the murals during their removal. We are committed to trying to keep the murals intact and in good shape. We have engaged 2 expert art restoration and removal firms to give us their opinions as to whether this is indeed possible. They've raised grave concerns because of just the way the murals are painted onto the wall. But we have currently an RFP, a request for proposals out to technically competent firms who could do this kind of work. We will get their bids back for what this will cost and whether they think it is possible in mid-September. So I'll have more news then, but we are committed to searching for a viable way to maintain the integrity of the murals. Exactly where they would be displayed, if we are able to remove them, is to be determined once we determine whether they can be removed. But thank you for the question.
Great, thanks. This one's for Dean King. What can be done about the numbers of non-competitive recruitments that are occurring in the School of Medicine? targeted recruitments with only one applicant in the pool?
I don't understand that question.
Okay, let's go on then.
I mean, do others understand the question?
I can repeat it. I can't really interpret it, but it says, I guess it's getting at recruitments that only have one applicant. So perhaps they're,
I don't know of such a
There may,
recruitment.
this is,
What
what it may be referring to is that, in fact, there are changes in academic series in some instances for faculty who either were hired onto the faculty as a adjunct faculty member pending their R01, and then they get a transfer in series, which requires a search, but we have committed to that faculty and invested in that faculty member. And in some instances, there are those types of searches. Otherwise, the searches typically are required to be open and have a full pool of candidates before they can go forward with interview and hire. Those are the only exceptions that I can think of. And we track those data to make sure, in fact, that there's not a disproportionate lack of diversity overall over the course of time.
okay, great, thanks. The next question is for you, Vice Chancellor Navarro. There are a couple questions about mandatory training. One is, will the mandatory DEI training be updated to include portions of anti-Black racism? And who will be conducting the mandatory training? Will there be a diverse panel of instructors?
Thank you for that question. So about a year and a half ago, the Office of Diversity and Outreach sought to get approval to establish a foundational training for all members of our campus community, faculty, staff, and learners. And over the course of the last year and a half, we have a task force that has been working on the core foundational competencies. We are now relooking at the curriculum within that training to include some specific issues around anti-Black racism, and so that is still under development. And in order to deliver a course, it's a foundational course to 30,000 members of our campus community. It will be an online training at this point. It is, however, just the beginning of what we know that individuals need in an effort to expand their capacity to be anti-racist. And we will lay out the additional trainings and opportunities for further development that are available on campus as well.
Thank you. This one is for Dean Watkins. How will the graduate division and other schools deal with faculty members who demonstrate clear microaggressions and other forms? Are there mechanisms in place for reporting and remediation for those faculty members in particular?
Not good ones, to be perfectly honest, and we really struggle with this question. And thank you, whoever asked it. You know, we've hoped that we could have informal mediations by students feeling comfortable to go to program directors or to the associate dean in the graduate division dean's office, but honestly, that hasn't really worked for a number of reasons. Students are intimidated and afraid to bring up these issues. They're concerned about retaliation. And so we're exploring the development of a bias incident reporting system. We know that there is one in the School of Medicine that's been used fairly successfully. Our students' relationships are very different with their mentors because they're long-term relationships in which students' careers are often dependent on those faculty, which sometimes hinders reporting. So we're looking for ways to overcome that barrier and then see if we can have some kind of system whereby we are reaching out to faculty who are inappropriate and remediating.
Thank you.
I'll just add a little to that we are in fact looking at a bias response team so that we could facilitate the kinds of conversations with the issues around microaggressions. I hope that all of you know that in fact, if you have experienced discrimination and harassment, that there is the Office for the Prevention of Harassment and Discrimination where you can file a complaint there. There's also an anonymous hotline where you can anonymously file a complaint. And we do everything we can to protect individuals from retaliation in the process of evaluating and investigating allegations. Part of the remediation may be that in fact faculty have to undergo specific education and training. If a faculty member has been found to be in violation of the policy, a violation of the policy triggers a faculty code of conduct investigation that is turned over to academic affairs for a formal faculty code of conduct investigation and sanctioning.
Thanks. This one is for any dean, so perhaps one of the deans who haven't spoken yet would be great to answer this question. How will the format of admissions and hiring decisions be changed to address systemic racism, specifically anti-Blackness?
Maybe I'll start, Mike, and you can follow up. So what I would say is that what has already happened, at least in the School of Pharmacy, is that we have taken a lot of, I think what one would say, things that historically have created bias, such as tests. Much like the MedCat, the school no longer uses what's called the PCAT, which is before was a mandatory test before enrollment. The school has also taken a holistic approach to admission, and this is not new. This has been going on for 5 years, which in fact, the real intent is to get 127 unique individuals who each contribute uniquely to the curriculum. That doesn't answer the Black specific issue, but we feel that at least we've taken a few steps to in fact take a few things out of the equation I think historically has created bias. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so School of Dentistry is very similar. We have looked at this issue broadly, and right now we're looking at adding an executive committee to our admissions committee that looks holistically at the class with the intent that we need to balance the portfolio of students to have diversity be one of the key components to creating excellence in the learning environment. So we're taking another step to look at it from a higher level, not just holistically for the individual, but holistically for what the group represents as learners.
Thank you. And this one again is for any dean. It would seem that content on race, racism, and anti-Blackness in healthcare and science presented in learner orientation would be appropriate for all UCSF students. Given most learning will be virtual this year, why aren't all learners accommodated in an interprofessional course series on this content at once?
I'll start on that. I think, you know, and Liz alluded to that about having a core curriculum. And I think that it's a matter of getting our education deans together and having them say, this might be the perfect example of interprofessional education that applies to everyone. So it's something that could be very valuable. It's a great comment.
Maybe I can add to that and then turn it over to Catherine and Talmadge. I completely agree. In fact, as I listened to the various presentations today, I'm struck that quite a bit of this feels like it could be more collaborative. We have similar issues throughout. And in fact, perhaps interprofessional is the real answer to this anti-racism approach to our respective curricula.
Ms. Talmadge, I have nothing to add to that. I like the idea a lot, and think that I guess I will point out that we as deans have had lots more conversations with each other about these topics, and I think we are working more together, and this would be another step in that direction.
I'll just affirm what's been said. The group, the deans are very collaborative. They share concern. They see the commonalities across our learning communities. And I think it's a good suggestion. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This one's for Chancellor Hoggood. I'm glad that the institution is committed to this work, but wonder if there's also a commitment to provide additional resources to the Office of Diversity and Outreach or the Office of Prevention of Harassment and Discrimination. These areas are likely under-resourced to do this important work.
Renee, I take it that you didn't ask that question.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
But it's a great question.
That Renee asked me on many occasions appropriately. We have put additional resources into Renee's office over the years, and we're working with her now to do more. Where we are is really building what is our program, what are going to be the metrics of success, how will we measure success, what are the outcomes we're desirous of, and then form will follow function. Once we have that plan well established, we will resource it appropriately from the Chancellor's level, but also from each of the Dean's level as well. And the health system. I noticed there are quite a few questions around the health system today. I just say that this particular town hall, the first of the series, is focused on students, but we of course will follow up with town halls on health and the health system and what we are doing overall in anti-racism in healthcare. It's a huge subject of discussion amongst the leadership right now, but was not on the agenda for this specific town hall.
Okay, thank you. There are a couple questions. Is there any way to help compensate those faculty who are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, who are doing so in an unpaid and unappreciated manner?
Well, I can start. I think the deans could also add in. I can say that through the Differences Matter initiative, very specifically, there is compensation for the faculty who are leading the pillars of that initiative. And that was done intentionally, recognizing the minority tax that many minority underrepresented faculty and staff and students contribute to these issues without compensation or recognition in a process of promotion or a performance evaluation. Similarly, the departments have identified in most departments a departmental diversity leader that reports to the chairs of those departments and are compensated for the time relative to contributing to diversity efforts there as well. Others might want to add.
Jump in. I can speak for the graduate division and say that the faculty who are teaching courses are compensated. And there, I happened to see a question in the Q&A that's related to this about using students and not experts. I want to point out that our students are our experts. When I talk about our PhD, our advanced PhD students in the social and population sciences, they are experts. They are doing cutting edge leading research in the area of health disparities and social inequities, and specifically in some cases on the issues of race and racism in science. And the reason that we're having them teach, for which they will be compensated, this is a professional development opportunity. The students I mentioned are our UC pre-professoriate, President's Pre-Professoriate Fellows, who are receiving special fellowships and stipends to help them join the academy and to encourage them to become faculty. And one of the things you can do in addition to your own research is to gain teaching experience. And what we know from our career counselors is that one of the best things that a student can do for their CV is to design and teach their own course. So that's why we're having them do that with some faculty supervision and support, and again, with compensation to account for the time it takes.
Does anyone else want to comment?
At the School of Nursing, we have experimented with smaller scale of what has happened in the School of Medicine. We've given some faculty members responsibility and compensation to be supporters. We learned a little bit from that. Unfortunately, there were circumstances that prevented us from finishing the project we were doing. But we're committed to continuing to look at what has worked in other places and considering what we can do within the school. We're small, and that we need to be thoughtful and try to use our resources in ways that we expect will be successful. I do want to emphasize that our students have said for some time that they believe they should be compensated for the work that they're doing to help us in matters of anti-racism and in the management of the school in their representation on committees. And we are looking into what we can do. We believe that we can compensate our students with stipends for the work that they're doing, at least on selected committees. I think it's important, and it's an example of a very good suggestion that came from the student body that we would unfortunately not have been able to think of ourselves, but once suggested that we wanted to take action.
Thank you. This is for Dean Watkins. Postdocs and fellows of color often feel unsupported or may not be afforded the same opportunities as their white counterparts. What efforts are being made to support postdocs of color?
Well, that was good timing. I was just about to start to type an answer to that question. Thank you. As I pointed out in my remarks, I really focused on PhD students and didn't get a chance to talk about postdocs, but I do want to acknowledge that our postdocs do feel the same challenges of isolation and exclusion. And so I can talk about a few things. One is we're really hoping to expand the programming that we do around our ERACTA scholars. That's a very small group of students from postdocs from underrepresented backgrounds. And we see that there's a lot of potential to include other postdocs in the programming that's developed for that group. I think a lot of what we hear is isolation because of labs. And so one of the programs, and I'm very excited that our Assistant Dean for Postdocs, Gabby Mosalve, is developing, is a new ambassadors program that will roll out later in the fall, which will provide support for postdocs with by meeting our new postdocs as they come, well, we used to come to campus, as they are hired, I guess I should say now, replacing sort of an anonymous orientation system with direct contact between senior postdocs and new postdocs, helping them to develop a cohort in a community and guiding them through the number of services and resources that are available. It's just a start. I know that we're behind in this effort, and I'd be grateful for suggestions if some of the postdocs have them.
Thank you. This one's for Vice Chancellor Navarro. What mentoring programs will be created to make a connection with the underserved communities in the Bay Area?
It's a very good question. Mentoring programs to work with the underserved community in the Bay Area. I mean, I know that through our anchor institution, we have been working to strengthen our ties to communities that are underserved across the Bay Area. We have not talked, to my knowledge, specifically about mentoring programs. And we are similarly engaging our alumni as alumni networks that can provide connections to our current learners and our current faculty and staff. But I would love to explore more about mentoring programs that connect with the community. Our Center for Science and Educational Outreach does work with all of the schools in the Bay Area, both in Alameda County and San Francisco, around pipeline and pathways for first generation and underrepresented minority students. And they provide mentoring and role model opportunities where our faculty and our learners, quite honestly, get engaged in reaching out to students along that K through 12 pipeline.
Renee, you might want to mention the Excel program for hiring from underrepresented communities and then bringing people in for heavily mentored internships and the success of that program and having those people placed in good jobs both at UCSF and elsewhere.
Yeah, so that is a part of our anchor institution mission, is to provide career opportunities to people within the community. And the Excel program is a partnership in which we work with the members of, there's a local group who helps to do the professional development. They come to our institution where they serve as interns, highly mentored interns, and then are placed in positions. And it's been quite successful in being a pathway into careers at UCSF, and we're looking at other opportunities like that. For example, clinical scientists working with our research mentors to have there be clinical research assistants who are from the community as we're trying to diversify our clinical research participants. So again, aligning what our needs are with the community's needs and really using the power of the university as an anchor institution in this community to better serve those of need.
Thank you. This question is for anyone. It's about environmental and racial justice. In these days of COVID-19 and of climate change-driven wildfires and heat waves, we are seeing how Black, Latinx, Indigenous communities and low-income communities in the Bay Area and throughout California are being hit first and worst by enormous environmental and health injustices. How will UCSF substantially partner with these communities and work toward environmental and health justice?
Well, I think that touches on the fairly large number of community programs that we have already in that space, and we are bringing together under the title that Renee mentioned, the anchor institution that Professor Howard Pinderhoos and others helped us put together, and we put resources into that for the first time this year, and I think that will be the way that we address the question that's raised. There's a very large inventory of programs that we work closely with community groups, but I think we identified that they need to be better coordinated to have maximum impact.
Great. We are at the end of our program, so I'll turn it back over to Vice Chancellor Renee Navarro for her closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I wanted to specifically thank Chancellor Hawgood. Thank you to each and every one of the deans who participated in today's very important town hall, and to the entire Chancellor's cabinet of leadership that has been very engaged and activated and really rolling up our sleeves and ready to work to dismantle the systems of systemic racism that exist within UCSF. I can tell you that we are committed to change. We recognize that the status quo is complicit in structural racism, so we have to change. And we want to live our full values and principles of community. And in order to do so, we really have to dismantle and change some of our systems. So I thank you all for your engagement with us today, for your thoughtful, insightful questions, for your continuous input to us about what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we're measuring the effectiveness of what we're doing. We anticipate that our process will be one of continuous equity improvement. And we thank you for keeping us accountable as we want to be accountable to each and every one of you. Please look forward to some upcoming events. In the fall, we actually will launch a curriculum, have a series of webinars on race and medicine to address some of the issues that were in the chat around how the construct of race and how we use it and think about it in medicine and science. We'll look forward to that, as well as our upcoming webinars. The one that will be in October will be focused on faculty and staff, in January on our health system, and next April will be our Chancellor's annual forum that we've hosted for the last 13 years or more. If you want to be able to join our listserv and get additional information about from our newsletter and resources, please go to diversity.ucsf.edu. We hope to keep updating that. We will be establishing a page that specifically addresses our anti-racism initiative, so you'll be able to see specifically what we're doing and how we're tracking our impact and outcome. So again, thank you very much for your engagement. Thanks to all of you. Have a good weekend.